Namaskar. We are very pleased to present to you the Inspiration Series on the occasion of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The 75 years of India's independence and its journey is being presented with a series of conversation with people who made a difference to India and the idea of India. We are pleased to present icons of modern India who represent the Indian heritage and the spirit of excellence it represents in the global arena. Today we have with us Dr. J.M. Sampath, a visionary, an inspirational speaker, an entrepreneur, and a modern Indian icon. I take this opportunity to welcome him and also present to you a very brief introduction. Dr. J.M. Sampath is a PhD, is a leading management thinker, consultant, author, angel investor, nurturing startups, coach, innovator in the personal and organizational space. Over the last 3 decades, Dr. Sampath has nurtured and transformed around 80,000 individuals across organizations in several countries by leveraging his proprietary developmental frameworks. His work continues to influence leaders and decision makers in education, public service, governmental agencies, business organizations, and NGOs. He was one of the 5 founder promoters of Kshema Technologies and has nurtured many startups since then. Some of them have grown to live their vision. Dr. Sampath is the Managing Director of Arpita Associates Private Limited, a center for excellence with offices in Malaysia, Singapore, and associate partners in many countries. He's also a fellow of Ashoka Innovators for the Public World, a world-renowned organization that nurtures, recognizes, and rewards social entrepreneurs and change makers. 3 decades of Dr. Sampath's research and quintessential learning has given rise to some path-breaking tools and processes, the most notable being the DNA of decision-making, the excellence framework, the vision values instrument, and the life orientation instrument. Leading business houses and high-profile business leaders across the world have adopted and benefited from these tools and frameworks. Nidarshana, an assessment-driven behavioral analytics company started by him, won the Best HR Startup Company Award 2016, and Dr. Sampath is an author of 3 best-selling books, which includes Discovery, Inner Realities, and How Full Is Your Cup. Incidentally, How Full Is Your Cup was on the bestseller list in Malaysia for over 8 months and is available on Amazon. He has presented several international conferences and seminars to audiences from diverse cultural backgrounds. As a part of his constant endeavor to raise level of consciousness, Dr. Sampath has conceptualized many ideas that are being developed as technology-driven products, an attempt to create well-knit social fabric that reinforces the growth and well-being of individuals, organizations, and society. Today we are here to understand and take Dr. Sampath's insight into how do we promote a culture of excellence. So it's an honor to have you, sir, with us. No better than a person like you to speak to us about what is culture of excellence. So how would you wish to define excellence?
At the outset, thank you for having me here, and it's an honor to be a part of this conversation. Well, how do I define excellence? I think this is one subject that I've thought a lot about. For me, excellence is flawlessness. So then the journey towards excellence is to keep identifying the flaws and correct them, only to identify the next flaw. And if we are truly on the journey towards realizing the potential of any person or an institution, that is possible when we are consciously and constantly working towards making ourselves flawless. I mean, I usually give this example. If you go around the world, they say there are 7 wonders of the world. The one, at least, that is in India, you go and stand in front of Taj Mahal. You can hardly find a flaw in it, and that's why it's one of the wonders. So how do we create institutions that can be flawless and humans who could be flawless? The beauty of life is there are flaws. So therefore, there are opportunities to correct them. There are opportunities to become aware of them. And there are opportunities to learn from them. So I don't see flaws as something which is a weakness. for me, a flaw is an opportunity to set something right and move to the next level. What I've seen as I worked with institutions and individuals is, at some point of time, we all become a little tired and we want to settle. We get into our comfort zone. We start creating an identity and we spend a lot of time protecting that identity, and that itself becomes a grain against you realizing your potential as an individual or as an institution, and you being on the journey towards excellence. So I think for me, excellence is a very deep word, and if anybody is committed, they have a lot of work to do.
Great. That takes us very deep into the concept of excellence. So from humble backgrounds, if we may know, what inspired your journey? I mean, this is a great profile for anybody to have, but starting from a very humble background, what is the drive behind your journey?
I think like anybody, I did my master's and got into a job, and life has a way of guiding you to get into something, which I realized a little later. But my very first job, I had a boss with whom I used to fight a lot. I'm sure that should sound familiar for some of you at least. But even when I was a student of doing my master's, I was introduced to human process labs. I was introduced to meditation. So they were my pillars to look within, to understand why I do what I do. So when I was looking around in the organization that I was working, where I had a boss with whom I was having conflict, there were some who didn't have conflict with my boss. And there were some of us who had conflict with him. So the question I asked is, look, if he's a problem, everybody should have had a problem with him. The very fact that some have and some don't have means I also have a share in this problem with him. So I started asking, what's my share? And where is this conflict coming from? Took a lot of time to reflect, introspect, meditate, to draw the insight, which when I got it, it sounded very simple. The answer I got was my values didn't match with his values. So then I said, if values are at the source of human conflicts, what's the work that's being done in this space? So I was hardly 26, 27 then. And I'm still working on answering that question, and that has been the beginning of my journey. It also led to me creating my first work called Discovery. I typically say in a public sector, if you are good, you will not have more than 2 hours of work. And if you fight with your boss, you will not have more than half an hour work. So I had a lot of time to develop this book come game called Discovery. The objective of which is to introduce basic human values to a person and to initiate a process of self-inquiry, which takes care of the need to learn. So my journey started there. And since then, I've been working on this subject, have created a number of tools and processes which you saw, which you narrated. But I think the journey is on. It's such a deep question that I still seem to be discovering some parts of the answer.
Great. So your responses seem to lead me to multiple dimensions. Allow me to ask you questions. Now, I've been going through your essence of your work, sir. Came across this phrase, consciousness leads to conscience. Would you like to comment?
So, it can be both ways. Conscience can lead to consciousness, or consciousness can lead to conscience. Ideally, how much are we operating out of awareness? I mean, you may stand in front of the wardrobe and pick up a certain shirt to wear for today. But were you conscious, or was it a mechanical act? You picked up a shirt, you picked up a... So, if I am conscious of why I am doing whatever I am doing, then there is a lot more clarity that emerges. And that allows me to be relevant to the context. Many of us, and when I'm relevant to the context, the conscience comes into play. So consciousness leads to a healthy conscience. So for me, that awareness, how many of us in a given 24 hours live with that kind of awareness? Are we really conscious of why we are doing what we are doing? You've initiated this conversation. I'm sure you are very aware why you're doing this series. What is that you want to accomplish through these series? That becomes very critical. So therefore, for me, I think our ability to remain conscious is what differentiates us from other beings.
So this question I'm especially interested in asking because as a university, we are proposing to commence the course on consciousness studies in that context. So one of your work also, you are actually very interested in seeking an answer how to bring about a process of questioning and achieving psychological awareness in masses. In fact, you suggest that psychological awareness should be a skill. So are you suggesting that we are not really aware of how we are thinking and it should be a skill?
You're right. I think we teach physics, chemistry, maths, economics, commerce, but how many of us teach students how to think? We take it for granted. We think everybody knows how to think. Many years ago, I had an opportunity to talk to the head of learning and development of Ford Motor Company in Detroit. And I had an hour time with this person, and the typical thing any consultant would want to do is to see how to get some more work from him. And in that year, the budget of Ford was for L&D $80 million. But when I decided to go to meet him, I wanted to understand how does Ford look at learning and development? How do they really address the issue? And that morning I did extra meditation so that my mind will be much more open to exploring the subject. So when I started talking to him, I realized that they were still telling people what to do, not making people realize what they need to do. And that's a huge difference. Do I give knowledge to people, or do I make people gain their own knowledge? A parallel to that would be, do you give a fish or do you help people to learn how to fish so that they can fish anytime they want? So therefore, when I was at the end of that 1 hour, I came up with a framework. What is the journey between ignorance to wisdom? I think education should create wise people. Unfortunately, I am very sad to make this statement, but that is the truth that I experience every other day. Today we have a lot of qualified people who are not educated. We have many illiterate people who are a lot more educated. And I wish qualification and education become two sides of the same coin, for which we definitely need to build a certain level of thinking ability in our students. Many of us think, very few of us think about the way we think. And very, very few of us think about the way we think about the way we think. So I believe that the minute I become aware of why I think the way I think, I will get some insights about myself. And that insight is very important for me to move to the next level of what I'm capable of being.
Perfect. So that brings me to the observation that evolution is a very conscious process. Thank you for that, sir. So you've been doing a lot of research in introducing games as training pedagogy, methodology. One of your very famous training methodologies is using snakes and ladders as a training method. Now, even universities and institutions are adopting gaming as a method of teaching. Could you please throw some light on that?
Well, that's a long story. Let me see how quickly I can share that with you. I'm not a voracious reader, but I'm a voracious thinker. If you give me a fat book, be sure it will become my pillow, not something that I will really read. But if you give me a paragraph which has a beginning and end, I would read that and I'll ruminate over it for days together. So when I finished my training, I was hardly 24, I finished my training in Bangalore, I was posted to Hyderabad. A set of friends of mine gifted me a book called Song of the Bird by Tony DiMello, which had nothing but 175 parables and anecdotes. So that was one book which I would open anytime, read whatever comes out. It wouldn't take more than 20 to 30 seconds to read, but reflect on it through the day. Sometimes just before going to the breakfast table, I would open a page, read, and I would go to the breakfast table, walk to my office, but keep the parable in the back of my mind. Sometimes just before going to bed, I would look at a parable, sleep through the parable. And this was my routine, very normal ritual. But one morning when I had read one of those parables, and I was walking to my office after my breakfast, I suddenly realized the characters in the parable were out there in my life at different points of time. I've been the gullible goat. I've also been the manipulative fox. I've been the overconfident hare. I've also been the slow and steady tortoise. So then I said, is it true about all parables? So I started collecting parables. I started reading, and I could relate to every character in the parable. And there came a time that I could also relate to the props in the parables. For example, if there is a broomstick in a parable, I was a broomstick in somebody's hand to clean up someplace. So I could go to that level of relating to the elements in a parable. So I said, am I crazy, or do people see what I see? So I went and spoke to some of my senior executives and said, look, I want to do a small experiment with you guys using stories and parables. The typical answer was, we are too old for that, Sampath. We'll get you our children. Why don't you do with them? So one of them got his 2 children and their friends, 4 of them, for a high tea, and he invited me. I went and spent an hour with those 4 kids. So I told them the story of hare and tortoise. You know typically what they would have said. At the end of the story, they said, oh uncle, we know the story. I said, I also know you know the story, but tell me in the recent past, when were you the hare or when were you the tortoise? One of the boys jumped up and said, look, in mathematics, I got 100 out of 100 in 2 tests. For the 3rd test, I was watching a video which my father brought. And when I went to write the test, I got 98, my friend got 100 out of 100. Maybe I was the hare. And another girl said, Sanskrit was a tough subject for me. I decided to spend half an hour every day. At the end of the year, I topped the class. Maybe I was the tortoise. But when I left them, they made one statement which became the source for creating the first game combo, the snake and ladder chart, which is, they said, uncle, we knew the story. We knew the moral of the story. Don't be overconfident. But we never linked it to us. And the truth of life is, if you go to our ancient wisdom, Jataka tales, they were actually written from human experiences and were used to help the monks to realize themselves. But because monks had a lot of egos, they brought animal characters to make them reflect and discover themselves. So I said, how do I reconnect this for the future generation? That was the challenge I took up, and that's how I developed the game come book, where I adopted the snake and ladder chart. If you see, we have a snake and ladder chart in our culture called Paramapadam, which we play during Shivratri. I don't know how many of you know, it's over 500-year-old. And there is a manual around it. And it is a symbolic way of helping you understand your journey hereafter. It's a very, very deep game. So, and then Sufism has a snake and ladder game which helps a Sufi to realize what he should cultivate, what he or she should not cultivate. So when I adopted the snake and ladder chart, brought it to 100 boxes, then for every box in the play chart, I created a corresponding story in the story album, the central theme of which is connected. These 2 were available anyway. But what was missing was the bridge between the 2 of them. So I introduced 3 levels of playing this game. The level 1 is called the level of explicit learning, wherein 3 obvious statements are made based on the parable and the value. Second is experiential learning. If you realize that each of our life as an individual or as an institution is nothing but a series of stories. And at the end of every story, there is a residue left, and that residue becomes the DNA of who you become as a personality. So we created an opportunity in the second level where we talk about experiential learning, where the individual shares his or her own story. The third level is called the introspective learning, wherein deep fundamental questions have been raised based on the value abstract as well as value related to one's own self. All that you expect to do at this level is to respond to these questions while the answers keep changing with one's own inner growth. Now, just to give you a quick illustration, the first box in the play chart is House of Learning. And the parable that goes with it is Eat Your Own Fruit. Some disciples once complained to their guru, you always tell us stories but never reveal their meaning to us. And the Guru replied, how would you like it if someone offered you fruit and chewed it before giving it to you?
Amazing.
Now the options at level 1 are learn to see the world from your own point of view. You can't see the world through others' eyes. We always want someone to think for us. At the experiential level, we say, can you share an incident when you depend on someone to see the world? Can you share an incident when someone wants to see the world through you? It happens every day in our life. Somebody joins this university who knows you, they want to look at this university through your eyes. Right. And you give your insights. So what is the process and how does it enable or disable me to discover this university myself? And then what does it mean to look at the world through one's own eyes? At the third level, which is deeper level, how do I learn? What motivates me to learn? What is the process of learning? Like this, there are 100 parables, 900 options to work on, several themes to focus on. So that was my first. And I believe that when you play, it's a subtle way of drawing insights, and that stays with you for a longer time.
True, sir. I completely agree, especially in the context of Chanakya University. We are especially going in a full-fledged manner in integrating the Indian knowledge system and storytelling into our curriculum and content of learning. I mean, I think your work would give us a lot of insight on that. So, considering the way you communicate with the present generation, I have this question to you. I mean, it's just an expression. How do we relate to them? I mean, we are a new university. We are dealing with Generation Z. And now, if I were to ask you a question, sir, is it the generation gap, or is it the communication gap, or is it the value gap? What are we dealing with?
I would say it's all three gaps. One, I think we first have to understand that the future is better than the past. That the younger generation is more agile, alive, and are more intelligent than I am. So then I have a lot more humility towards them. But many times what happens to the previous generation is they believe they've seen everything in life. And is that what they've seen out of life relevant to the current generation? I don't think so. Because when I grew up, what were the number of gadgets in my house? 2, 3? And what could they do to me? Today, the boy who's coming into your college is exposed to so much of knowledge and variables, that they are far ahead of you in knowledge. I believe that it is important to tap their capabilities. I'll give you one interesting example. There was a family and they were very upset with their eldest son who was into a lot of gaming. And they were very sure that this guy is not going to make it. But to everybody's surprise, he created a startup in the esports industry. And he's doing so well. Now, I believe I can't see life beyond what I understand of life. But do I have the openness and humility to include others' understanding of life into my life?
So that, I think, is a great insight for especially teachers, because I think we'll have to match our urge to teach with a willingness to learn. I think the days are gone where we believe that we are imparting them information and knowledge. We should be equally willing to learn. So you have expressed a great desire to work with teachers who churn out the social system. You believe teachers and institutions are very important. In that context, being a university which is on the threshold of launching pioneering work, what would be your advice to us as teachers, as people who are trying to envision a university?
I think any good learning space should have full of learners. And you rightly said before asking me this question that for me to be a great teacher, I need to be a great learner. Without being a learner, I can't teach. Without teaching, I can't learn. So it's a mutual process. And I also believe that whatever you call, the smartphone has made knowledge a commodity. If you're going to give me knowledge in the classroom, I'm going to Google and find out if what you said is right or not. I can come and challenge you. I believe today the need is to create knowledge. And there is a lot of scope for us to learn how to create knowledge. I don't need to know how many people were involved in building Taj Mahal. I can Google and Google will tell me. But I need to understand what was the emotion behind building Taj Mahal. What people went through in the process of creating that marvel. Why was it created? Google will not give me those answers. And we need to create those ability to reflect and get those kind of thought processes behind existing knowledge. I can talk about Gita, I can talk about Ramayana, but can I go and try to dive deep into the essence of these scriptures or Quran or Bible? I mean, knowledge is plenty, but have you understood, how much of knowledge have you understood? And any good learning institution should create that curiosity to know in a child, in a student. And you will find it difficult to create that in a student if you as a teacher are not curious to learn. So therefore, I think for a good education institute to succeed, the teachers should be curious in creating knowledge. They should see students as co-contributors and co-creators. Then I think we become fellow travelers in evolution, in becoming who we are capable of being, rather than one giving and the other receiving. And that has worked with me. We work with children as young as 13, 14 years. And we also have worked with people as old as 70, 80. And we have found that it was easy to talk to all of them for the simple reason that we don't give them any prescription.
So allow me to come to this question, so because your persistent focus area is values. So there's a constant understanding, I would say a cry that values are in the decline, or otherwise values are changing. Otherwise we are not able to foster or protect our values. In that context, questions are two. One is there something like universal values? If there are, what would you suggest? Otherwise, how would we actually educate children or people about values? How do we do that?
So I've spent 35 years on this word values, and I'll continue to spend the rest of my life. I think we all have a mistaken notion about the word values. So very early in my life, when I started understanding values, I came up with a meaning for the word values. I didn't want to consciously call it a definition because that would limit my understanding of values the minute I say this is the definition. So the meaning I've come out with for the word values is, my values are the beliefs I hold within myself which governs my behavior in any given context. Some of these beliefs are known to me while others are not, yet they govern my behavior. Now, for me, the most important word in this meaning is context. There is no meaning for the word value without the context. And we as human beings, if we are truly values driven, we'll have to focus on how to be relevant to a context. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. You and I may not believe in killing another human being. But mind you, if this country is in a war with another country, and if you and I volunteer to go and fight the battle, you and I would be honored with a Paramveer Chakra for destroying the maximum number of enemies. The context becomes very, very important of why you do what you do. Or when there was Sikh riots, people lied when they had Sikhs in the compartment when people came to kill them because our Prime Minister was. But that lie was a very, very needed and very context relevant lie. There the lie was much lower than saving the life of another human. So I think we try to, on the one hand, tell people, be honest. we don't tell people understand the context and be relevant to the context. We don't teach students that. And therefore what happens is, one of the biggest challenge when you talk about values is, the first thing that any student will do is, he will evaluate you on the values that you are asking him to live by or asking her to live by. But if we can teach them what it means to understand the context and be relevant to the context, I don't think any value is irrelevant. What is missing is our inability to use that value in the right context for the right reason. And we need to, if we are genuinely interested in value education, we need to help our students, help ourselves understand what the context is, what the context demands, and be relevant to the context. In other words, do I serve the context or do I want the context to serve?
Good. So you have lived through a transition phase in India, and you've been traveling the world, you know what the world is and how India is changing. We are in a stage where India is changing visibly, perceptibly. Now we have a lot of youngsters watching us. So what would be your message? How is perception of India changing globally? How are we changing globally? So some light on that.
Yeah, I think the first time I stepped out of the country was 27 years ago. And the first country I went to was US. And I still remember the first dinner meeting I had with some executives at Ford. They thought I was coming from a country of snake charmers and where buffaloes walk on the street and elephants roam around. That has significantly changed. That view has significantly changed. I think India has prepared all of us to adapt to any condition. I think the last 200, 300 years we have seen from being great to becoming nobody. And we are rebuilding ourselves. I think our ability to adapt, our ability to understand and be relevant is much higher than anybody else. Particularly the Eastern culture and wisdom has a lot more depth than the Western. I can tell that with a lot of confidence. Okay. But what is important is we have to, somewhere unconsciously, we have the colonial inferiority built into us. That when we see a white man, we subconsciously bow to them within ourselves. I have no problem bowing to anybody. I will bow to anybody who is more wiser than me, more knowledgeable than me, because I want to learn from that person. But I don't want that to be based on any color of the skin or any nationality. It has to be on equal basis. So I will tell every student, believe in yourself. You have a heritage which is a lot richer than anybody else in this world. And if we can trust that that heritage is a part of my DNA. I remember in 2000 I was given a hint if I would like to move to US and join a company there with very attractive offer. I said, I will not leave this country. Because I truly believe that if you walk bare feet out there in the garden, something will pass through your soul and you will achieve a certain level of insight. So therefore this mud is very rich, and I believe that we should have that pride in us, that we come from a heritage which is very rich, and each of us have the potential to reinvent ourselves, and each of us have the potential to create. And today you can see that in reality. Many of the CEOs are from this culture and were brought up in this culture, and many startups which are doing well have been born out of this mud. So I think we are regaining our status as people who can deliver, and I think we should just believe in ourselves. That will be my most important message to youngsters today.
Great. So allow me to extend one more part of the question. We have a lot of youngsters. India is the third largest startup in the world today after US and China. In that context, we have a lot of youngsters who carry an idea, who wish to nurture it as an idea. So what would be your message to the youngsters who wish to aspire big and join a university? How do they nurture an idea? How do they make, as you mentioned, you have converted a hobby come career to a cause. Now, not going there, youngsters have certain ideas. How do they nurture it and take it to a logical conclusion? How not to be distracted by the fascinations? Some specific lessons.
I think anybody who's thinking about idea will have the fear of, will it succeed, will it not succeed? But I will go one stage before even the ideation. I have created a concept of 5 C's. And I believe that we all have to empower ourselves and our students and the future generation to be able to do these 5 C's with great ease. And what are those 5 C's? Ability to connect 2 dots, correlate them, contextualize, create and capitalize. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I mean, my earlier home used to be very close to Lal Bagh, and going for a walk in Lal Bagh was a privilege. So, and there is one cotton silk tree which is 200-year-old, I don't know if you know that. And it's pretty huge and tall. So one fall season I was walking towards the tree, and there was a leaf that was falling from the top branch. As I saw the leaf, I connected, I said, wow, the tree has shed a leaf, what did I shed today? Then I said, why did the tree shed the leaf? Because it no more can produce the chlorophyll that is required for the tree to be healthy. I said, what's that behavior in me which is no more relevant, which I need to shed? I didn't stop there. I said, what happens to the leaf that falls? It gets decomposed, becomes a manure. So anything I shed will not go waste. It will be a part of my DNA, which will come forth when there's a need for it. So I'm sure millions of us have seen a leaf fall from the tree, but we never connected to it. We never correlated it to anything. We never contextualized to growth. We never created something out of it. We didn't capitalize it. When I say capitalize, it's not necessarily money. Capitalizing is sharing a knowledge. I have capitalized by sharing this experience of mine with you in this interview. So therefore, we are talking about, can our minds constantly keep connecting? And when you connect dots, you can create knowledge.
Only if you could learn how to learn from, consider nature as a teacher. What you said is truly an eye-opener. So, we do have an audience which comprises of teachers and others. Allow me to take some questions from their side as well.
Please.
I think there must be a lot that they wish to have a little more clarity on. Before that comes in.
I'm very open.
Oh, great. Before that comes in. So you have been a startup mentor, an entrepreneur. How important is institutional or individual social responsibilities? How do we integrate social responsibility as a part of learning, as a part of doing for individuals, as a process of learning and teaching in a university?
We do a very interesting program with schools, and for some reason, I think we have lost the ability to empathize with society. So, in the program that we have designed, where we teach, it's called life education, and when the children come to the 10th grade, we make them do a project which will run for 40 to 60 hours, and we call it SAP, Social Action Project, where a child can pick up an issue that the child is witnessing or has come across and can do something about it in 40 to 60 hours and come back and share with us what did they learn out of it, what did they do. And I'm glad to share that by now there are more than at least 6,000 to 7,000 projects done by children, and at least 5 to 10% of the children have continued with their social action projects even today. They have finished 10, they're 7 or 8 years into their life, and they're still doing some social action. So one is to connect. Coming to enterprises being socially responsible, I am one of the co-founders of a company called Punarnava. It's in the Ayurveda healing space. We have a hospital in Rotigando village near Coimbatore. What we have done is we have adopted 15 villages around us. And we, for the last 7 to 8 years, every day 125 meals go to the destitutes in the village. Once in a month we do a health camp. We also realized that there were children who have been orphaned in the villages, so we've opened a children's home for them where we take care of their education. I strongly believe that you can't grow a great business if your environment is not growing with you. Whatever that environment is. If it sees you growing without they growing, it will one day revolt. So I think every corporate should believe that it is important for the society to grow. And I will, as a sociology student, I'll give you a very interesting analogy. Many years ago, the palace used to be the largest building in the neighborhood. And that was the place from where the society was taken care. Then came superstructures like the temples, be it the Tanjore temple, the churches. They became the source of power. Today, if you walk around in Bangalore city, the largest buildings are business houses. And they are the source of power, and they are going to turn the society around. Kingdoms have failed. Our Vidhan Saudas have failed.
Yeah, that explains quite a lot actually, sir.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that you mentioned that. One of our very ambitious idea, and of course which is being considered, is the integration of Indian heritage of knowledge into learning and system methods. If you could give us some insight at how can Indian heritage and the knowledge heritage can be sustained and spread, especially among the new generation?
I think it's a very important question and very difficult question. Where did I have challenge? I'm a staunch believer of Indian heritage, but I'm equally a believer of contextualizing it. If I can tell what Gita says or Ramayana says without having to use the name of Gita or Ramayana, I will succeed. But the minute I go and tell a youngster, this is what Gita says, he says, my God, I don't see anybody living that yet. Why are you telling me this? But if I can, and particularly Indian heritage has so much of wisdom hidden in it. I mean, when I have a personal collection of over 7,000 to 8,000 parables. Some of these are 5,000 year old. How did it survive 5,000 years and how is it alive even today? Give me a modern management book which has survived 20, 30 years. So therefore, there is no question, the heritage has a lot of essence in it. Can you take the essence, contextualize it, present it in a way that can be consumed? And I will, since I'm a man of parables, I'll tell you a little story that will answer your question. It seems there's a man who had a Doberman for a pet, and somebody told him cod liver oil is good for dog's health. So he rushed to the market, bought a bottle full of cod liver oil, and in the evening when he came home, he caught hold of the dog between his thighs, took a spoonful of oil, tried to force it into its mouth. And the dog did not like this. The minute he came, he would go and hide under the sofa, it would go and he had to catch it and bring and give the oil into. One day when he was trying to give the oil, the dog managed to escape. And in the process, the oil in the spoon spilt on the floor. To his surprise, the dog lapped up the oil that fell on the floor and came to lick the spoon. That is when he realized what the dog was resisting was not the oil, but the way it was being given. We as teachers, we as an institution should learn how to deliver in a way that the Indian heritage will be nurtured and continued. However, we insist that we will give it, because when we were child, we saw our mother using that thing to force a medicine into. So that belief system still exists in us, and we don't seem to have changed our ways of giving. But you could have given the oil to the dog in any way, left it in a bowl, dipped the bone it plays with into the oil and given it to it, injected it, do anything. There's no one way to do anything. Are we going to be relevant? Can we understand the students, and can we make them tell what we would like to tell them themselves? Then we have succeeded as an institute.
Superb. So you're mentioning the very timelessness of these lessons and essence makes it, rather than just being Indian knowledge heritage, they are the heritage of essence of the heritage of knowledge itself, timeless and relevant across the world for all time to come. I mean, that's a very beautiful story that you mentioned about. So allow me to ask a question. We are at India at 75. How would you visualize India at 100?
I believe that we will become source of many things. I think if we genuinely believe in ourselves, we would provide leadership to the world in several areas. And one important area will be in culture, in tradition. Today, I mean, many youngsters don't do what was told in our tradition. It's coming back in a different format. We talk about intermittent fasting. Today, everybody is talking about the secret of fasting. But we have a Ekadasi fasting. It's built into our culture. I know people who have meticulously lived that life of fasting, who have had a much healthier life. But unfortunately, anything that is born here has to go to the West, come back to you in a different form, and then you will gulp it. So I wish that we will be able to develop, and people will be able to see the relevance of many things that we do. And we have to just present it in a way, as I said, that is contextually consumable.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll wait to see if there's any question from the audience. I think there are quite a few people waiting to. Until that, yes, Professor Sharma. Yes.
So you have defined excellence as flawlessness, and flaws as opportunities to set things right. But in my experience, I found that aiming for perfection leads to frustration. So should we learn to coexist with some of our flaws, or should we constantly try to overcome our flaws?
That depends on what your goal. If your goal is peace, don't bother about your flaws. If your goal is to evolve, you better focus on that, because what other way do I have to evolve if I can't overcome my flaws? So it depends on what your focus is. If you don't want frustration, I think for me frustration is a good thing. I tell jovially that I find it difficult to live a conflict-free life. When there's no conflict, I'm worried. Hey, have I gone into a beaten path? Have I settled? Have I got into a comfort zone? But what is important in this conflict is I constantly monitor the quality of conflict. Are we still fighting on the same mundane issues? Oh, the infrastructure is not good, this is not good. Or have we elevated those conflicts to, hey, we have to give our students much more than what we are giving today. We have to work on new strategies to teach. I think those kind of conflicts are very essential. That will help us to move. But to your question, what's your goal? Peace? Don't worry about flaws. Accept them. If you want to grow, look for them.
Beautiful, beautiful. So allow me to ask this question. We are on the threshold of a journey, Chanakya University. If we are to be a place of global learning, relevant for modern times and connected to our heritage and roots, we have to be a center for inspiration. What would your advice to us be? What would you expect from us?
That everybody who steps into this university should first be a learner. Should have that curiosity to know why things happen the way they happen. Should have, for the teachers, this is my humble suggestion, they should have love for children. They should see students as an opportunity to enable themselves and the students to grow. I think if you can bring that into the DNA of this culture, then I think we have a great university in the making. And I wish you all very, very best to become that university that will be a role model for many to follow.
Thank you, sir. I think one of the earliest points you raised is we no longer are a learning organization, we'll be a wise organization. We'll take that as a very important guiding point. Do we have questions? Okay. Sir, on that note, it was pure honor sitting with you and a pleasure listening to you, sir. On behalf of Chanakya University and the audience, I take this opportunity to thank you for your visit and being a part of this series of inspiration. We continue to look forward to your association and guidance in our endeavor and journey.
Thank you for having me here. I enjoyed this conversation as much as you did, and I wish this university a great success, and I would be happy to be a part of its journey.
Thank you, sir. On that. Thank you.